Hi, everyone. My name is Megan Weigel. I'm a nurse practitioner in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm here today to talk to you about bowel and bladder function when living with MS. I personally don't have the answers, and I'm really lucky to be here with two people living with MS who are open to sharing their journey with you. So I'd like to turn it over to Jeff and Charlene so you guys can tell us a little bit about yourselves.
I'm Jeff Harris. I was diagnosed with MS back in 2001. Like most people, probably had it before that date. So I'm 20 years into this. And I would say it's been a slow progression for me. So my bowel and bladder issues, I would say, first became notable and maybe halfway through 10 years into it. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah.
Jeff, for being willing to share.
Charlene?
Charlene?
Hi, I'm Charlene, and I was diagnosed with MS in 2005. And unlike Jeff, my bladder issues started pretty early on and are probably my biggest challenge, which we'll talk more about as well.
Yeah, thanks, Charlene. It's really great. Bowel and bladder issues aren't always easy to talk about. They're not always the first thing that the healthcare provider wants to bring up, and they're also not always the first thing that a person living with MS wants to bring up. So with that being said, since we're on a live recording here and people are going to watch this to learn from you guys, I do really appreciate your willingness to be here and be open about your symptoms. So, Charlene, how have bladder problems impacted your daily life? And let's also touch on sleep here, if you don't mind.
So, as I said, bladder is my biggest challenge. It has definitely impacted my daily life. My sleep, it will usually wake me up around once a night at the minimum. And from there, I just have to make sure that I am prepared with any necessary tools that I need and just make sure on a daily basis that I have that. The good news is I'm a woman. I get to carry a purse. I can hide a makeup bag in my purse with whatever I may need, whether it's pads or catheters or even a change of undergarments.
So do you tend to self-cath before you go to bed in hopes that you might not wake up?
I always, every day, you hit the floor, you cath, you go to bed, you cath, and hopefully that prolongs the amount of times that you'll need to cath throughout the day.
Well, that's definitely a good strategy for people who are new to self-cathing to use if they're not yet doing that before bed. Thanks for sharing that. Jeff, how about you? How have bladder problems impacted your daily life and your nightly life?
Yeah. So similar actually to Charlene. I used to, my whole day would revolve around when it was time to pee. So I would get up when I had to pee in the morning. That was my start of the day, which really was pretty regular, after sleeping for 8 hours. But my problem was becoming at nighttime when it was time to go to bed, I had to wait. And it was all a mindset that I can't use, they make these urinals for men that you can take just about anywhere. And I did try using that several times to no success, and they're very easy to use. But it was in my mindset that I can't, this can't be me. So once I got over that psychological hump, I now make it a practice of trying to pee sometime during the night in this thing because it saves me a trip to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So yeah, it totally affected my schedule. And even now it still does. I mean, throughout the day, I still have that problem where I either need to manage my fluid intake if I'm going to leave for the day, because now I'm to the point, I'm in a power chair. I can walk very little. I can't even use a handicap bathroom anymore without assistance. So my strategy usually is to somehow urinate before I go somewhere, which again, I got to manage my intake, to that time of day. And then hopefully I can go 4 or 5 hours, but now you're dehydrating yourself. So it's a tough thing to balance for sure.
Yeah, and that then affects your bowel management, right? Which then
Yep.
makes you more likely to have a bladder accident. So
Correct.
Do you travel with urinals when you have to go out to appointments?
I don't. I have two caregivers, and they can assist me in those bathrooms.
Uh-huh.
Since I can't drive anyway, I always have to have somebody with me.
So you have someone with you.
Correct, correct.
Yeah.
And the urologists have suggested using called a condom cath. I mean, this is only good for half of the population, but
Yeah.
that's something that I'm going to try. And you basically, I guess, either carry a bag or you rubber band it around your leg or something. But that would allow me to go out. You can wear that all day, I guess.
Yeah, so we've talked about a few strategies here, using a urinal, a handheld urinal,
Yeah.
self-catheterizing, and then for men, a condom catheter. And particularly if you have issues with dexterity of your hands, it's difficult to self-catheterize.
Right.
I think Charlene and I, as women, would agree that it's probably a little harder as a man to wrap your head around self-catheterizing, but many do it and find it to be a godsend. But the condom cath is another type of catheter that can improve your quality of life so that you can get out and be more social and active. And it is a bag that just is fastened around the leg, sort of like if you were to have a Foley catheter.
Right.
So it is manageable during the day. Thanks for sharing that, you guys. Charlene, how did you begin to get help for these symptoms? How did you know it was time?
Well, it was actually kind of embarrassing at first, if I'm completely honest. It's hot here, and of course, we all know heat is not our friend. And I actually happened to be at a music festival the very first time that this happened, and I was like, oh no, I can't go to the bathroom. So it happened to be a weekend. It wasn't like I could call the doctor up and run in to see the doctor and get help or try to discuss this. So I had to go to the emergency room, and that was my very first experience. So I just got thrown into the fire feet first with this experience. And then after that, the next time it actually happened to be a weekday. And I was fortunate enough to be able to call my primary care doctor and get into them immediately, because obviously this is not something you can fool around with. You can't obviously not be able to empty your bladder for an extended period of time without potential more damage to yourself. So thankfully I was able to get in there and I talked to the doctor. And at that point in time, because it had been two incidences relatively close, I'd say probably within maybe a month time frame that this had happened, then the primary care doctor actually set me up with a specialist, and I was able to get in and see a urologist and we tried some medicine. We tried some different scenarios first before we went to cathing. But unfortunately, as I said, this was one of my early onset issues. And so it didn't last long before I had to start doing the self-cathing on a more regular basis. And it just continued on from there.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point that ultimately, if you don't have a good handle on managing these bladder symptoms, the result can be chronic UTIs, which ultimately can affect your kidneys and your bladder muscles even more. So it is important to get a hold of that. I mentioned earlier that when one gets constipated and your bowel's full, it can press on your bladder. So some of the management tips that we hear people use, like, well, I just don't drink much water anymore, can really backfire.
Yeah.
Jeff, how about you? I mean, it sounds like one of your biggest challenges has been having to pull back on social activities, which I have a feeling you enjoy. So how did you know it was time to get some help for those things?
I don't know if I guess I'm not shy. So I already had a urologist because I have kidney stones as well. So I didn't have problems approaching the neurologist and the urologist on these issues. And the first thing they did, because I was having some trouble also controlling, I think that was due to constipation. So they gave me, I couldn't tell you which drug it was, but something to relax, I believe relax the bladder. But I'll warn you that when you take something to help your bladder, it can be negative for the bowels. So
Yeah.
it's a very delicate thing. You got to be patient with yourself to come up with a solution that works for you, because all of your circumstances are different. But that's kind of the path I've gone down. I still have a challenge with the bathroom. I'm sitting here within 20 feet of my bathroom, and it's a half an hour round trip for me to get in there, get out of this chair, pivot onto a toilet, and then do everything in reverse. And that's just a pee. That's not number two. So
Yeah.
it's going to be a challenge, but it's the right thing for me for now, besides trying the condom cath that I described earlier, which would allow me to leave for the whole day.
Right, right. And you bring up a good point about adaptations in your bathroom. Do you have bars?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
great.
Yep.
So it's important to know that there are people who can assess the home for things like that. Occupational therapists can help you with recommendations for home modifications, and kind of coming up with strategies in the home to have good energy conservation,
Yeah.
for transferring, getting undressed and redressed. So thanks for sharing those tips with us.
Mhm.
Charlene, I think you probably have a nice bag of tips and tricks for women who live with bladder issues from multiple sclerosis. Would you mind sharing those?
Yes. So that's back to what I was saying earlier. I easily conceal my tools in a makeup bag, which, like I said, it consists of a catheter. And speaking of the different catheters, I actually use what's called a speedy cath. And it's very easy to conceal because it's about the size of a tube of lipstick. So you don't have to worry. You can stick it in a pocket if you're going somewhere that you can't take a purse. Or like I said, you can carry it in a makeup bag in your purse. You've got pads, you've got a change of undergarments. Those are the different tools that I usually carry on me now, and not too far distance that I can access. Something that I was told very early on in my diagnosis from another caregiver of someone with MS was to carry an extra change of clothes. And I mean, honestly, I just think that's a great idea, because whether it's bowel or bladder, or, you spilled your coffee at your work desk or something of that nature, I've actually found that to come in handy a few different times for, really valid reasons for what we're talking about here, but also just, for the occasional accident that just happens in everyday life, regardless of your situation.
Yeah, those are great hints. Jeff, you mentioned earlier managing your water intake, and I think that consideration of the condom cath would be a good thing for you, so that you didn't have to worry about managing your water intake so much.
No doubt.
Yeah, is there anything else that you do when you go out for outings?
Well, yeah, I do. Like, I'm invited to a wedding here in I think it's November. So I called ahead. Again, I think I mentioned that even a handicap stall, I've got this
Yeah.
big chair. By the time I'm in there and I have a caregiver in there, there's no room. That's what I mean. What by I can't use a handicap stall. So I need the family bathroom, the extra large handicap bathroom, I guess you'd call it. So, you call ahead, make sure they've got the facilities that you're going to need. The change of clothes is a great idea, Charlene, or at least undergarments, like you say. And I do actually carry one around the house in a walker that I use to pivot, because again, my walking capabilities are very limited. So I have to have everything within arm's reach, preferably. But I currently I'm still using the managed water or fluid intake. But again, I caution that that's not a great strategy, because it creates a bunch of problems, actually dehydration, and then it just adds to the constipation, which then leads to it's
All
a
kinds of other things,
yeah,
fatigue, spasticity.
yeah.
But I love that idea of calling ahead. I when you're going to a new place or to an event to find out what facilities are available to you.
Mhm.
I think at least when I've talked to people living with MS, they tell me things like, I know where all the bathrooms are in my local airport. I know where
Right,
they all are in the stores in which I shop. And many people don't think about when they're going to someplace new, calling ahead and making sure
right.
that their needs are met. And that just takes a lot of anxiety out of going to a new place. You guys
Yes.
are sharing really great stuff. Thank you. I hope that the folks watching find this really helpful. So you guys have been pretty open about sharing with me. We know that you talk to your healthcare team about bowel and bladder issues. Do you talk to other people about these challenges?
Well, up till about 10 years ago, I would have probably tried to hide these kinds of things. As I started asking doctors about it, I became more comfortable. And I'll tell you, now after 10 years, I mean, I've actually got neighbors that have come up over here and helped me off the toilet. I mean, that's how open I am about it now. I'm lucky to have great neighbors. If you've got
That's
neighbors
great.
like me, keep them. But I don't. I mean, it's not something that I bring up in casual conversation, but friends and family, there's the appropriate times and inappropriate times. And if they don't need to know, they don't need to know.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
the way I
that's true.
look at it.
Absolutely. And when you need help, it's nice to know that the people that you've confided in are there to help you for sure.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
How about you, Charlene?
Well, I am the opposite. I don't talk about it with anybody. I mean, really outside of my husband and my mother, it's not a conversation that I have. It's one of those things that it's a personal matter and it's an issue that I have to deal with. So for me, it's a personal choice. It's a choice not to talk about it, and it's also a choice to deal with it. So I can either talk about it or I can just deal with it and move on and, not make the fact that I have this challenge to work with be such a focus, a main priority. So that's my choice for not talking about it. Now, obviously, my husband knows or my mother knows in case if there were ever some serious emergency or something of that nature. But obviously, I choose to deal with it and move on and not just not wallow in self-pity, because really, honestly, that's where we could easily find ourselves with having to deal with these challenges. And especially they're so personal.
Yeah, that's a really great point. They are personal. And I think that choosing who you share these things with, basically, so people can know when you need help.
Yeah.
They can know what the signs might be when things are topsy-turvy for you, and maybe step in and say, hey, do you need to use the bathroom? Do you need any assistance? What can we do for you? But not necessarily, broadcasting private matters. I will say, as a healthcare provider, that when we ask about bowel and bladder issues, we may not ask in detail about bowel and bladder issues. And so if your healthcare provider asks you how your bladder function is and you say it's okay, and maybe they're new to your case, or maybe they're not managing your equipment, let's say, you might say, well, it's okay, I self-cath 3 times a day, or it's okay, I'm learning to use a urinal before I go out, and I'm thinking about taking a condom, or about trying a condom cath. So do be open with your healthcare providers, because they may truthfully not know what's going on behind the scenes, behind the bathroom door, so to speak. A couple of other things that I think are important to mention are other means to manage bladder symptoms. Some people get Botox injections in the bladder. Charlene, you have a bladder stimulator.
Yes, I do.
So that's been part of your journey
It has.
with bladder issues.
Yes.
And Jeff, you've mentioned managing bladder and bowel issues with following a healthy diet.
Yeah, and actually, it might help listeners to know that those tubes are intertwined, and one does affect the other. That's not just you. It's a real problem to manage.
Yeah, and I do think that we sometimes we look to a quick fix. Like if we're constipated, we go right to an enema. And I think that it's very important that when you're having issues with constipation or with bowel leakage, that you talk to your healthcare provider before you even use over-the-counter things, because some things can be very easily managed with diet changes or with increasing your water intake. Well, do you guys have anything final to add? This has been a great conversation.
Well, the one thing I guess we haven't talked about, I haven't experienced it yet, but I know somebody who's a specialist, and they call it floor, but it's basically pelvic therapy, which, like
Great
you
point,
say,
Jeff.
is outside of the medication for you. I don't know if anybody knows what Kegels are, but women are supposed to do this after they give birth, and it's basically to control the whatever it is valve that helps you stop your urine stream.
Yeah.
And you can practice it like right now. You can just do this while you're sitting. But there's actually therapists that specialize in that and can help you stay out of medicines and just get better control, period, which is another thing I am considering, especially since I know this lady.
Which is really great, Jeff, because many men don't realize that pelvic floor therapy can be beneficial for them as well.
I learned that from my ex-wife, actually, every time we had a kid.
Yes. So that's a great point. Thanks for bringing that up. And really can make a difference. And just because you do it once doesn't mean you might not need it again later on and living your life with MS. Thanks for bringing that up. How about you, Charlene? Any last comments?
No, actually, but Jeff did bring up a great point. And I will say, before I actually had my InterStim done, I actually went and did the pelvic floor physical therapy is basically what it's considered. So it's definitely something worth considering, regardless male or female. And, some people, depending on how spastic or whatever the issue is with the bladder, there's been a lot of great results from that. So we know everybody's journey is different. So just because, I sit here and say, well, it helped, but it didn't do everything for me, doesn't mean it's not going to be beneficial for the next person, of course.
Right.
Yeah, great points. Well, I think we've run the gamut of talking about lifestyle aspects that can help with bowel and bladder management, to medications, to rehab therapies, to devices. And I really hope that people watching will get some good ideas to take to their healthcare providers if they haven't yet done that. And I'd like to thank you both for being here with us and sharing about your MS journey.
Thank you.
Thanks.